Newton was one of the first people to model the world as a system of parts, and he was one of the first to investigate the logic of many types of systems. And this is just as far as I know. Maybe there was people before that, but what I've noticed is when people talk about Isaac Newton, they talk about physics, they talk about calculus, they don't talk about this, which I think is even more.
Yeah.
It's deeper than those two things. It's deeper than physics, because this is like the logic of physics. He explained that all real systems have interdependencies between their parts. And that's like saying there's cause and effect relationships. And it's also like saying, you know the phrase, the sum is not equal to its parts?
Yeah.
Okay. If the parts of the system were not connected and there was no cause and effect relationships, then that wouldn't be true. Instead, what would be true is the sum is equal to the parts. The fact that the sum is not equal to its parts implies that when you put parts together, things are happening that don't happen when the parts are not together. The cause and effect thing. Now, the really cool thing is something he said: as the number of interdependencies between the parts of a system increases, so as this goes up, as we go to the right here, the number of parts that govern the whole system decreases. You see it's going down?
Yeah.
Until it reaches exactly 1. So what does that mean? It means that any system that has sufficiently enough interdependencies between the parts has one thing that if you were to change it, it will affect the whole system. And all the other things, if you change it, nothing happens. This matters to the human body and medicine. It matters everywhere, but let me bring it to your life. Welcome to the first podcast for Uniting the Cults. This podcast started because a now friend of mine, who I can't say his name because it's not safe for him, so he's going to be called Anonymous here. He asked me a question basically asked if I gathered my writings on religion, cults, science, and human nature. And we ended up having a 2.5 hour conversation where we ended up talking about these things instead of just showing him my writings. 2.5 hours, of course. And it was really fun. And so let's go ahead. And I want to warn you real quick. It got recorded in a weird way. 3 different videos that got slapped together, and then the third one ended up being in the middle. It's really weird, so sorry about that, but it's not going to happen again for future ones. All right. All right, so we're here to... The way this started was you asked me, you came to my, Reddit DMs, and you asked me for basically my compiled writings on religion, cults, science, and human nature. And I could have just made a list for you, but I thought it made more sense for me to make a list that incorporates, your situation and what you want, what you already know and what you don't know, and stuff like that, instead of me making a list with just myself, So, so I started doing that.
Okay.
I have a Google Doc that I want to show on the screen now. So I put your question in here so we don't forget it.
Exactly.
And I don't mind changing things as we go, but at least we know where we started.
Yes.
And I already want to change a couple things, but I want to ask you if it's okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask you if it's okay. So
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, sure.
So first I want to say, related to these topics, I have written a lot about these, but there's some stuff in this category
Okay.
that I have not written a lot about, but I know other people have, and they are good. I would like to include those.
Sure.
So it's not just my writings.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
totally fine.
also maybe videos too. You're okay with videos?
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely okay. I'd
Okay.
love. Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
adding. All right. I guess we can start with my blog. So here's my blog. Since we talked a couple of days ago, I've added labels to each of the posts, and I added a search function. So I'm gonna take you there real quick.
That's
Is it showing my blog now?
it does. Yeah, it
It
does.
does.
Very
Okay.
good.
So to the right, you'll see it calls it popular posts, but it's my 3 main most important posts as of today. So, and then below that, I made 3 or 4 labels: human nature, Islam/religion, parenting, and science. You
Science.
notice
Yeah,
cults are not in here, and
exactly. Yeah.
that's partly because I have not talked a lot about cults, so I don't have anything about that. And you notice I put Islam/religion. That's because most of my writings that are about religion, they do mention Islam. Very little of my religion writing doesn't talk about Islam. But you know, that makes sense. I'm coming from Islam. Like, if you look at Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, he mostly talks about Christianity because that's where he
Christianity, exactly.
came from. Yeah. I would like to talk about other religions, but I don't know a lot about them. I have studied Christianity a little bit, and some of what I've studied I actually like. Maybe we should talk about that at some point during this call.
Yeah.
So if you click on any of these, like this one, what I don't like about my website, my blog website, it's Blogger, by the way, or Blogspot.
Yeah.
What I don't like about it
Yeah.
is it doesn't give you a list, and it just shows them one at a time in an entire series, So there's 60.
Oh,
Yeah, that kind of sucks. You'd have to scroll through all of it.
it does. Yeah, yeah. Then
Yeah,
what
I
was
don't
the
like
search
it.
function for?
Well, you can do the search function too if you're looking for something specific, like let's say, but this only works well if you knew what was in the document. Or I don't know, let's say you wanted to
Which,
find something about let's try to pick a topic.
yeah. What about the Richard Feynman his cult science post? Can we search for that?
We could search for that, but you're talking about this right here, I think.
Oh
Richard
yeah.
Feynman's speech.
Yeah, about
So
cults.
you
Yes.
could click right here and read that. And there's also a YouTube video. I recommend looking at that too. There's pictures in there that help understand what he's saying. And actually, I want to show you something else. I now started a blog on the Uniting the Cults website. Let me show you how to find it. Right here. And so this
Okay.
is the same post, the same content as what's on my blog for this particular blog post, I mean. But it's more I tried to make it more professional. I put a
Of
picture in
course.
there. The other one doesn't have a picture, So that's all.
Yeah.
There's only one blog post on the website so far. I'm gonna do it once a week. But anyway, so back to my blog. If you search, I don't know, let's say you searched for
Search for.
I don't know, let's say you said I want to know about what Rami said about anger.
Okay.
For example, here's a post: God is slow to anger, abuse and anger, atheism, the
Abuse and
faith of
anger,
intellectuals. I actually right now do not remember why the word anger is in there. Because I wrote that many, many years ago. So let me say this. One thing I would have you consider when you're looking at any of my writing, the older it
Yeah.
is, the less likely that I still agree with it.
Really?
Yeah. There's some
Yeah.
really old stuff. Like I started writing on the internet in 2011.
That's a
So if
long,
you
long time ago.
if you found some stuff I wrote in 2011, 99% chance I don't agree with half of what's in there. But I
Yeah,
still
I
agree with some of
disagree.
it. I still agree with some of it.
Yeah.
There'll be nothing that you see me written where I disagree with all of it. Like even Islam, okay?
Yes. Yeah.
I remember before I got married, I remember thinking uh Islam is definitely for morality. Okay? And I'm not a Muslim anymore, but that's still true. I still believe that. And which means I still care about morality. And that if we were going to have a religion, it better be about good morality. Which a lot of people know. This is nothing fancy or special.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay,
So
back to
how
the
can Rami, you're not, you can just take out the post or the blogs that you don't agree, writings that you don't agree with anymore.
I think there's I actually don't there's too much to go
Or
look through.
okay.
There's too much to go look through. And again, because
Yeah.
some of it is still good, I don't think it's worth it to get rid of it. Plus, I think people should see the reality that
That's
we
true.
make mistakes and we change our minds in the future. So I don't think I should
Exactly.
delete.
The thought
Yeah.
process, how it improves, how it changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, another source. So that was my blog. Another source is so for the past 3 years, I've been on the ex-Muslim subreddit, uh, writing all sorts of things. And I found them to be good enough where I'm making a newsletter just for that subreddit. And I title it
Really?
posts helping people before and after leaving Islam. And I just want to show you real quick the newsletter where I'm
Yeah.
like keeping this information. So this is a spreadsheet that has a lot of stuff in it, but one of the things is all the data of my newsletter. So right now, here's the title: 40 plus posts helping people before and after leaving Islam, April 2024 edition, which I'm going to post in a few days. And 25 of these are new compared to the last one. And
Compared to,
you'll see,
okay.
huh?
Yeah, 25 of them are new writings.
New posts. And when I say new, I mean compared to the March edition.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. This is only the second one. The first one didn't even have the word March in it. The first one had 29 posts, and this one's got like 48. This one's got 48 right now. And I try to make it easy for people. I identify which ones are new from the last edition with that icon. And now I'm making videos of these. So on my YouTube, or the Uniting the Cults YouTube, let me make it easy for everyone who's watching this. You can go to the website and then you can just click right here, YouTube. And there it is. There's 6 videos up right now. And I'm putting out 2 a day for now. And let's see. And What else? Okay, so now let's get into details.
Yes.
The stuff that I haven't talked about much is cults. And I know there's a lot of good information on the internet already about cults. I have not watched this yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be good. I'm going to watch this soon with my daughter. Cults Explained. It's a Netflix documentary.
This
So
is
I
the name of
definitely
the
recommend that
documentary.
for
Cults
anyone.
Explained.
Cults Explained, Netflix documentary. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm sure it's good. Every documentary I see on Netflix, I end up loving. Okay. Now I want to explain something. Cults. What a cult is a group that's doing cult behaviors. That's one way to describe it.
Yeah.
And cult behaviors are pseudoscience. And that's why Feynman used the term cargo cult science. He's saying anything that's against science is what cults are doing. What cults are doing is against science. It's one or the other. So so when you're trying to learn about cults, look for pseudoscience as a term. Also, confidence art. Have you heard that term, confidence art?
I've never heard that term before.
Have you heard conman?
Yeah, I did.
Conman is
okay.
Man who does confidence art. Con comes from confidence art. And confidence, what we mean by confidence there is like, think of it in sales real quick. This is bad selling.
Okay.
One way to sell a product to you is to get you to have confidence in me.
True.
And then there's people who play that game and cheat. Like, I can know how to get you to be confident in me and play all those strings in you like a puppet.
Yeah.
And then you will have confidence in me, and then I can cheat you the way con men do. Well, Muhammad did that. So
this is called confidence art.
Confidence art. I learned about this shortly after becoming an atheist. I don't remember what I actually, I think I do know how I started learning about that stuff, because I've been conned in my own life, aside from Islam. Little things, like somebody stole $25,000 from me. It's little compared to the Islam con. I remember reading, I read some article on the internet that now I cannot find. And it was, if I remember correctly, it was an FBI website, an FBI article.
Okay.
The reason I mentioned that is there's so many smart people working in our government who know these things. And they don't go out and talk about it too much. I mean, they might write a blog article and it's something they're doing in their work, but they're busy trying to catch con men. They're not really busy trying to teach us what confidence art is. If you want to learn confidence art, I recommend two documentaries, one on Bernie Madoff and one on Jeffrey Epstein. And they don't talk too much about, they don't even use the terms confidence art. They might use the term con man, and they're not trying to teach what confidence art is, but these two documentaries are two very nice examples of con men. Let's see. So I guess that'll give you a good enough start to go learn about
sure.
cults.
I have to check out the documentaries.
Yeah, to learn about cults. Okay, so the other, let's see, religion, cults, science. Okay, religion. if you just want to learn about religion, independent of Islam, my mother read The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. She speaks very highly of that book. I read a little bit of it, and I noticed something that I didn't like about it. It's like there's a lot of meanness in it, a lot of derision. But I don't know. I can understand why people have that coming out of a religion. So I don't complain about that kind of stuff too much. It happens in the ex-Muslim subreddit a lot. You get a lot of ex-Muslims, and you can see the hate that they have. Maybe not necessarily for people, but definitely for ideas, hate of some ideas. What's my point? This is kind of getting off topic. I guess this gets into human nature.
Yeah,
hate being a part of human nature.
But Rami, don't you think that's kind of justifiable, the hate for the religion that we see from a lot of ex-Muslims?
Well, you know, I used to think hate is wrong in general, like except for maybe hating hate, which isn't really hate anymore, if that's the only thing you hate.
Yeah.
You said justifiable. It's definitely understandable. Let me give you an example of something that might be justifiable. Okay. Like if we talk about it in the most extreme case, just to see, okay?
Okay.
I have 2 daughters. If somebody raped one of my daughters, I think I might have some hate in my heart. That's never happened, and I hope it never does, but that's the kind of scenario, yeah, I might. And you know, and what Islam does to a lot of people, and for the past 1400 years, it's like that and worse. And there is a lot of rape too, by the way, in that.
There is, yeah, I can attest to that.
Even in marriages, even in a marriage, because in Islam, there isn't marital rape. Like, obviously there is rape. It exists as a thing that could happen, but in their conception, that is not rape. So let's see. So that's an overview of how to get the information. Do you want to actually talk about some of this now? I mean, you already started by asking about, is there justification for hate? That's like part of human nature. Other than that question, or do you have more follow-up questions about that?
I actually would love to also talk about cult a little bit more. How can a common man differentiate between a cult?
Say your question again.
How can a man who's inside a cult realize that he is he is one of the members of the cult? Because I think it could be blinding, or majority of them, they do not realize that.
Yeah, well, one thing is, it would be good to know all of this.
Definitely, but what if you don't know all of this?
Well, you have to go learn it. You have to go learn it. It's and it's important even on a small scale. Let's ignore the cult concept for a moment. If I'm going to go to a store to buy a cell phone, I should know the evil ways that salespeople act and the good ways that salespeople act, so that I can avoid the evil and keep the good. And there are salespeople who learn how to do confidence art to cheat you and get you to buy something you would not have bought if they didn't do the confidence art. And that has nothing to do with cults. So, yeah, you got to learn those things for every little stuff, every little thing in your life. And then that will also help you with how to identify if you're in a cult or not.
Yeah, makes sense.
But we can do stuff like the major major things. If I was to pick the highest thing, it's stuff like in order to join, you must excommunicate from your old group. There's a lot of that in a lot of cults. It doesn't mean all of them. And by the way, when we talk about cult behaviors, I'm not saying that any one cult has all of them. That's not necessary for it to be a cult. And also, if you look at some of the other stuff I've been talking about, there are groups that are not identified as cults, but they are doing cult behaviors. So, for example, the US government, it has this tendency to treat whistleblowers as traitors. And a whistleblower, just to do an example of somebody, Julian Assange, he was working for, I think, the CIA or one of those government organizations. And he saw that the US government was cheating its own citizens. So he wanted to expose that by exposing a bunch of secret documents. And in doing so, he is helping America. He's helping US citizens from persecution or abuse by its own government, by their own government. Well, that's not what a traitor is. You know, a traitor is someone that is against the country. And the country is the people, not the damn government. The government is only representatives of the people. So if you want to talk about who the country is, it's not the government, it's the people. So Julian Assange is not against the country. He's for the country. He's a whistleblower, not a traitor. That is when the US government treats him as a traitor. And I don't know if you know his story, but he's right now in Russia running. He can't come to America anymore. So when the US government does this kind of thing, that is cult behavior. Now, would I call US government a cult? No, but the definitions like that don't matter to me. And they shouldn't matter to anyone. We should look at the behaviors themselves, the cult behaviors. And just to be clear, like if you catch yourself doing a cult behavior, it doesn't mean you're part of a cult or you are a cult or you're Hitler. It's just one thing that you're doing that you could do better on by not doing that thing and doing something else instead.
Yeah. So this is about the example. He was exiled from USA.
No, he ran away so that he doesn't get tried for treason. And I want to be clear, US government, if you're tried for treason, it's death penalty.
Yeah.
And by the way, when we ex-Muslims tell Muslims, hey, you guys are bad for having the apostasy law, their defense is, well, you guys have the treason law. And they're right, but the solution is to get rid of both of them. And they're assuming that I agree with my own government. I do not.
Yeah. Ramya, it's a bit off the topic, but I would want to mention that a lot of time while talking or having discussion with the Muslims, they do a lot of whataboutism. If you mention something bad in Islam, they would be like, "What? Oh, what about this in the West? What about this in Europe? What about this in the USA?" Like, I mean, yeah, it's bad too. It could be bad as well. So they do this a lot. The Muslims.
Yeah, a lot of people do that. But you know, one way to fix that is something I'm doing, which is I am criticizing Islam for having cult behaviors, but at the same time, I'm criticizing every group that has those behaviors in the same message. So now nobody can say, well, what about so-and-so? Because I'll say, oh, that's bullet point number 10. Just look.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, makes sense now. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so it was the first thing was like to identify the cults through their cult behavior, which was one of them. They tried to stop every communications with their ex groups, like let's say their old groups. This is one way to identify the cults.
It's one way, yeah. There's excommunication after leaving. So, like a really extreme example that Americans know about is, what's it called? Scientology.
Yeah.
You know that?
Yes.
Scientology.
Yes.
They claim to
Yeah.
be a religion. It's a cult. And one thing they do is if you leave, well, it's both ways. Once you join the group, you're not supposed to talk to your family anymore. That is the ones that are not in the group. And let's say your family does join, and now they're in the group, so your whole family's inside of it. If you leave Scientology, the group, now your family that is in the group is not allowed to talk to you. And the obvious reason they're doing this is the talking is what helps people see the bullshit. So they're trying to get people to stop talking.
Exactly. That's a cult behavior now.
And Islam does that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Our verse is specifically about that. Do not
Oh,
befriend the disbelievers. Yeah, do not
oh
take them
yeah,
as
yeah, yeah,
gardens.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a verse
Yeah, they're
exactly
trying
for
to
that.
get us to not be talking to these other people that know some things that we don't.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, it's it's not that much different than what a lot of parents do with their kids. If their kids bring up something that the parent doesn't like and it's from some source, they'll say, "Don't talk to that person anymore."
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's a bad thing. I don't agree with that at all.
But now, Rami, do you think that's a cult behavior that parents do, or would do, or might do?
It it is a type of cult behavior, and the cult here is the family.
Huh.
Let me. Um,
From source, yeah.
I don't know if I'm explaining that very well. Sometimes
No, no.
sometimes it's something like it's a family member. Like, so I have an example. I have a friend from Iraq. He's an atheist. A lot of his family is still Muslim, or almost all of his family is still Muslim. His nephew once came to him and asked him, "Do you believe in demons?" And he answered honestly, while trying to not, disrupt things too much. And his sister, the mother, told him, "Stop talking to my son. In general, stop talking to him." And she told the son, the nephew,
Yeah.
"Stop talking to your uncle about these things." I mean, that's called behavior. Why? Why stop talking to him?
Yeah. They would they would want everybody to like stay in the same echo chamber that they try to make. Yeah.
Making an echo chamber.
I'm guessing. Exactly. I'm
Yes.
guessing everyone outside of this echo chamber might be might be prone for some kind of influence, right?
Don't want outside influences.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking about, and I don't right now I don't remember how it got me thinking it, but it got me thinking about this thing I wrote a few years ago, uh, an article titled "Imagine 5,000 years ago when we were just a bunch of tribes, and there's two kinds of tribes." And I didn't use these terms when we were talking before, but you may have seen these before: non-zero sum and
Yes.
win-win.
Yeah.
You've heard those?
Yeah. I've heard it in a like more in economical notions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This term came from economics.
Yeah.
This term was older than that, I think, from just philosophy. And they basically mean that we can work together and everyone can win, instead of this ideology, or ideology is not the right word, this set of assumptions, let's call it, of a worldview,
Okay.
is that in any interaction, there has to be a winner and has to be a loser.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so, let's see, that's my blog, and there's the article. Are you a Benvillian or a Marpian? Uh, and what I tried to do here is describe the two kinds of tribes and how they evolve over time,
Mhm.
and what sort of individuals are in them and what they do, what the leader does, what the Marpian leader does versus what the Benvillian leader does. Um, Ben comes from benevolence, which means good. And this word I tried to go with mal, M-A-L, malevolence, which means bad. And I didn't want to use any words that would identify any particular religion. So when people read this, by the end of it, they might have a conception of, what groups or religions or whatever fit in the mold of Benville and Marp. Um, and and then I don't know how we eventually got to talking about, we might have just switched subjects. We got to talking about, how did we get to this? I remember you were telling me of the flavor of Islam you were involved in.
Yeah.
Uh, what was the name again? Salafi?
S- No, no, no. Sufism.
Sufism.
Yeah. The
And it's
slow.
it's
Yeah.
those ones where they spin around.
Yeah. Yes.
That's all I remember. That's all I remember. And the
It
word
is. It's
spirituality
yeah.
in there.
Yes. It's the more spiritual branch of Islam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know if you said this or I asked you. You said it's about a connection with God. Uh,
Exactly.
and then I think I asked you, because I've heard this from other people, these things. I've
Mm.
heard when I've heard people talk about spirituality, I heard them talking about, love instead of hate. How do you do it? And how do you find peace? Those are related, right?
Yes. Yes. They are. And then you try to explain spirituality.
Yeah. Well, it's more like I'm trying to understand what people mean by the word, and then seeing how that connects to stuff I already know, which I don't use the word spirituality for those things. Uh, so like remember, well, so yeah, let me just open this up real quick. I remember,
Okay.
I remember somebody asking, they wrote a post in this group with this exact title: "How do you continue to practice spirituality after leaving Islam?"
Yeah. Yeah. I remember
And I
that
asked them for
post.
permission. This was the person right here, spiritual address. And I thought that was a good question that they were asking, but I needed clarification because, like I said, I never know what people mean by spirituality if they only use that one word, because it means like a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
True.
So I asked, do you mean like how do we love instead of hate? And they said yes, but also they want an alternative to Islam that gave them peace, like another worldview. So that they're asking us, the other ex-Muslims, I guess, what replacement worldviews we have that gave us peace. And she wants one that, is spiritual. And anyway, I thought that was a good clarification on her question, and it led me to saying this stuff, which a lot of people liked, by the way. And to be clear, I'm not even really directly answering her question here. She's asking for another worldview, and I don't answer that right from the get-go. I start answering what gave me peace, which was to realize that some parts of the worldview I had were wrong. So the first one was realizing Islam was a farce. And it wasn't peace right away. First, it was like anger and sadness, and then there was peace. And maybe it was quick, but there's transition period for sure. And then I found peace when I found out other things were a farce. A really, really, really big one for me was when I learned about how the American education system was designed in the 1860s, after the Civil War, right at the start of the Industrial Revolution. It's not written here, but it was designed after the Prussian education system. That's the education system that produced the people that followed Hitler. The people that followed Hitler were taught in this Prussian school system that I'm talking about, which then America copied. And what it's designed to do is make you just smart enough to work for the companies and be a somewhat functioning citizen, being productive, working for them. Because it's not really working for us when you hear this next part. They didn't want us to be smart enough to question the status quo of the country, the politics, how the country's being run. And I can explain how they did that, but that's, I guess, another video I should do. But the book here explains it, The Underground History of American Education by John Taylor Gatto. He wrote this book in 1995 after a 30-year career as a New York school teacher, New York City school teacher, and he got awards as a school teacher. And then I go on to say more recently how I found some peace was realizing the role of love in human relationships. I used to think rationality is the most important thing and love is irrational. And now I think love is fully compatible with rationality, and it's more like the goal, and rationality is the method to achieve the goal. And I don't have any book for this. Maybe there's books. And then the rest of this is just an invitation to my group, my new organization. Let's see here. Yeah, and then that's, I guess, what got you talking about my Love and Reason group.
Yes.
And I guess we should just look at it real quick. So this is an older group. I started this 3 years ago. And that's around when I realized this thing about love and reason. And I put the word love in front of reason because the goal should be in front of the method, right? The goal and then the method. And I remember you asking if the group is dead, do I use it anymore? It's not really dead in the sense that I killed it, but it's nobody uses it. I don't post in it, and the reason I don't post is people don't really reply. There's other places where when I post I get a lot of replies, like the ex-Muslim subreddit. So I spend my time there. But if somebody wanted to ask me questions and it wasn't about Islam, there's not really a good place to do that besides this group right here.
Rami, can I interfere for a second, please?
Yeah.
So last time that we talked, like there were however, I'm still not connecting the dots between school and spirituality. Like, do you suggest schools should teach us how to be spiritual?
Schools? Why do you mention schools? I'm confused.
Because when answering the spirituality question, you went on and talked about how Americans' education system.
So, yeah, I wasn't saying schools should teach spirituality, but let's backtrack a little bit. Let's ignore schools for a second and just think about education. Okay.
Okay. And can we have a like a concrete definition? How do you define spirituality as?
I wouldn't do that. I would let the people that say it define it, and they do define it. You've told me this. I've heard that from other people. They tell me this. They tell me this. There's a fourth one that somebody said recently. Let me. Where did they put it? It's not here. There's a. Let me see if I can find it.
That's okay. If I define it for myself, I'll say spirituality for me is connecting to something higher than humans. It's trying to connect to something more.
Oh, I remember what they said now. Something about purpose. And a lot of people do talk about that one. They talk about the meaning of life. You hear people talking about that?
Yes, a lot.
Yeah. And from what I understand, what they're seeking is like, why don't I kill myself? Because if there was no purpose in life, that's what we would do. There's no other reason to be here. When people have asked me this question, okay, this is maybe off topic. You were asking like a definition of spirituality. If I'm gonna give it a definition, it would be this. What everyone else has told me about that word. But you asked me how is it connected to
education, let's say education system.
Yeah, and I wanted to replace that with education. And education is like how you go from a blank slate birth until what we are today. And it doesn't stop. You know, if I live till 95, my 95th year, I will be educating myself.
Yeah.
But you can think of education as the more general stuff rather than the little stupid facts. Like, so in school, in history class, they would focus on dates a lot. And, you know, sometimes dates matter or whatever, or at least ranges, but like knowing the particular date of some event while you don't know the significance of the event, that's meaningless. Knowing a date of an event that you don't know why it matters is meaningless. So I wouldn't count that under education, okay? Knowing somebody's name, that's not part of education. Education is very general things. It's stuff about how you think. So if you're asking, and the reason I didn't want to talk about school is parents are doing this first, and then they send their kids to school. So it's not school. It's because school is only a part of it. Also, what schools, if they were in their right minds, they would tell you, and I think they do tell you this, school is to learn how to learn so that when you're done with school, the rest of your life, you know how to do it and you spend the rest of your life learning. School is not what a lot of people think, which is I learn while I'm in school, and then when school is done, I'm done learning. Now let me go use what I learned, and I'm not gonna learn anymore because I hate learning.
Okay, that makes sense, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So forget school.
Okay.
I'm gonna put a line through this. How do I do that?
Yeah, we can say education in the more general term.
Is there a line? Strike through? Where's strike through? Damn. Do you know the strike through command?
Wait, give me a second. I've opened the Zoom in my phone, so I'm really far. I cannot
Yeah,
see everything.
whatever.
Strike
No, no,
through.
it's all right. I didn't.
Okay, okay.
Don't
Yeah.
worry about it. I just make it italics, so that's fine. So think of it like this. Think of the question like this. What should people learn about spirituality? And another way to word this is what should parents hope for their children to learn about? And what
Why
I would
not ask,
say, go ahead.
but Rami, why not start before that? Why should we learn? Like, why learn about spirituality first and foremost?
Yeah, that's what this
Then we
question is.
can ask how. The question is how or
Oh,
why?
why? Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think it answers the why. Once you hear the
Okay.
what, then you'll see the why.
Okay.
Um, well, you can't really answer this question without getting into the details of this stuff. And like, if I was just to look at this stuff, yeah, I think this is important right here. Love instead of hate. If you don't know how to do that right, you're just gonna have a bunch of hate in your heart. You're gonna have a shitty life, shitty life. And what you do is you think in terms of revenge all the time, grudges. You spend your time hating instead of loving. That infects your mind. And I'm, and actually, when you're somebody that hates people, other people is what we're thinking. You're also somebody that hates yourself. That doesn't feel good.
Hmm.
There's no way to separate those. You can't be someone that hates people and then somehow you love yourself. That doesn't work. That's an inconsistency in logic, you know. Um,
Yes.
how to find peace? Like, what's the opposite of peace? It's like, so when people have anxiety, when they're depressed, that's the opposite of peace. So I think peace right here is like saying all those bad things are not there. All those bad emotions are not there. But
Hmm.
not just emotions though, like, but maybe this is just emotions. Like if you're worried about your future, let's say you're
Okay.
not sure what career you're going to have and you're really worried about your financial future, not just your financial future, but also, a lot of people are in a position where they, you know, can try to go after a, a way of making money that is also fun. A lot of people don't have that option, but somebody that's in that position, they would find it uh, a way to find peace is to find that way of making money that they love instead of the thousand other ways they can make money that they don't love. Um, and then, this one, I was just mentioning it. If you don't have a purpose for your life, doesn't have to be a purpose, could be multiple purposes. This is why people commit suicide. So if you're asking why should people learn about spirituality, again, I wouldn't necessarily call any of these things spirituality, but I know other people do. So I'm using that word so I can connect with people. I would call this stuff morality. This is morality. This is kind of like epistemology, connection with God. I want to say something about that real quick. So I've noticed that if I take any statement from a theist that has the word God in it, out of all the statements ever been made like that, there's three categories I can fit them in. The first category is replace the word God with universe, and it makes sense to me. That sentence makes sense to me, and I agree with them. The second category is you replace the word God with truth, and that sentence makes sense to me, and I agree with them. The third category is maybe has a bunch of things in it, but what I've noticed is it has implications of like that God either loves or hates you, or well, see, even in a sense like that, like if people say God loves you, the universe is benevolent. That is the same meaning. But in my conception of saying that, when I say the universe is benevolent, I'm not saying there's an entity that created the universe and looks like us and cries like us and gets angry like us, or has any or any mind or anything. When I say the universe is benevolent, all I mean is the laws of physics do not prevent us from loving each other. The laws of physics do not require us to be hateful. The laws of physics do not require us to have and act out the win-lose mindset. The laws of physics allow us to act out the win-win mindset. And then, so that's it. I guess I covered all four of those. I'm sure other people would fit other things into this. Let's say you're somebody that has trouble functioning well in a romantic relationship.
Okay.
I think people would say something about spirituality there. Maybe not. Maybe they only think about I'm sure you've heard people say things like love yourself. That's a spirituality thing.
Yes, I've heard it a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but that's psychology. Why even use the word spirituality? There's no spirits. There really is psychology. We have a whole field of scientists working on psychology. Well, a lot of people think science doesn't apply to, meaning of life questions because they're only thinking about the empirical part of science. The non-empirical part of science works perfect for all this stuff. All those things I said so far about these four things, like the idea of replacing the word God with universe and trying to make sense of that sentence, that's a scientific thing that I do to be able to do that. There's people who don't do that. They're not thinking scientifically, where they never try to replace a word with another one to see if it makes sense. Like where they're almost using words as if they are the ideas, which is not how things work. Like just because everyone's using the word God doesn't mean we're all meaning the same thing by that word.
Exactly. That's a very
the word
good
itself.
point,
yeah. So when I replace words and see if they make sense, that's a scientific thing I'm doing. It's scientists are very good at it. I've noticed physicists are very good at not being confused by semantics, because a lot of what our work is doesn't involve words to begin with, like a law of physics. Like some of it is in math, and we know we can represent math in many different ways, many different symbols. We know the symbols don't matter. I mean, linguists know this too. I don't think there's a linguist, somebody who studies language. I don't think there's a linguist that doesn't know this basic thing of don't focus on the word, focus on the meaning under the word. It happens in law a lot. If you ever studied, there was a Supreme Court case I was very interested in, and I don't have a background in law, but I hadn't studied anything really besides what I knew from civics class in 8th grade, which is very little. They don't teach shit. And I studied this court case, read the documents, discussed it with a lawyer, 2 or 3 lawyers, and I started to understand very well what was happening. And in doing that, I noticed a lot of the techniques that the Supreme Court judges are employing in their thinking is all scientific stuff. Like, as an example, this basic thing of, words have meanings and we got to look at the meaning, not just the words. And stuff like, here's another example. I love this one so much. It makes me think. When I learned this, it made me realize and have a huge respect for the law and how lawyers and judges think and their whole tradition, the like school of thought of law. One of the things they do is, if you're going to claim that something is an element or part of a set, you got to have, like, let's say, some logical tests that you would apply to any entity, to any one of these, to see if it passes the tests, and then if it does, then you could say it's one of these. It's a very formal process, and it's very scientific, and I noticed like nobody does this. And an example where it helped me explain things to people was the concept of the miracle and the concept of prophecy. What I noticed is, when people say there's a miracle or a prophecy, they never say what they mean by that word. And they never say, for example, okay, I have a post about this. They never say, so here's what I believe a miracle is. Here's the 3 logical tests that I use to determine if something really is a miracle. And here's all the miracle claims that ever were made by a Muslim. And here's all the miracle claims that was ever made by anyone else who wasn't a Muslim, somebody who's a religionist or even non-religious people. And then I performed those 3 tests on every one of those things. Like, I've never heard anyone talk that way about miracles and prophecies, but this is the scientific way to do it. I got off topic there a lot.
So it's okay. I did enjoy that.
So the reason we got into this was you were wondering why I was talking about love and reason, and I was trying to clarify that the words I used to use before this, which people are not used to, is epistemology. Basically, no one knows that word unless you studied in a philosophy class. And then the other word is morality, which a lot of people know that word, but I don't think they know what it means. So instead of, also it brings in a lot of bad ideas. If I have a post and I use the word morality, especially if I use the word objective in there somewhere, and all kinds of things go wrong in their brain and they get confused. If I just use the word love, it's a lot more clear to so many people. And then we talked about how they're interconnected, because I think you asked, so scientists or science has, you asked if science, the method of science, has anything to do with morality. Yes, something like that.
Yeah.
Answer is yes, because if you are immoral, meaning you do the wrong things, the product of your science is 0. If you're dishonest, if you lie about your research, if you hide your mistakes, you might fool a few people initially, but eventually they catch on. And even if they don't catch on, the product of your research was 0. If anything, it's negative, sabotaging. Because if, let's say, 100 scientists after you built their work on your research, which was all lies, then it ruins a bunch of their research.
Yeah. We also talked about the mice research, where the doctor, But just to interfere here, I want to ask a question. I mean, last Zoom meeting, we also agreed on that love is a set of actions.
Yeah, instead of
right?
just feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, but isn't it also the feeling? Like sometimes you do feel it inside. There's an emotion, there's a feeling. Is that also
Sure.
part of the love?
Yeah, I mean that's like, think of that as two different words. There's
How?
the word love. Here's what you need to do here now.
Okay.
Make two words, define them, and then don't use the old word anymore because there's too many meanings in it. So we might say love one is the morality part, love two is the feelings.
By the way, I'm just writing down your words.
By the way, you can have this document later. This is going to be public.
Yeah, I would love to, but I also write down notes and hear things that are, yeah. So love one is the morality part, and love two is the feelings. Yeah?
Sure.
Okay, that answers it. Yeah. Nice.
I heard that in Christianity, the word love, which of course they don't, it's not English, so it's different words to begin with, right? Different language. But what I heard is that there's 7 kinds of love. So
7 kinds of love.
you get what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, I do. Do they each have different definitions?
Yeah, all different things. And I tried to find out from somebody what those were. They didn't help me, and whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Like, I get the point. There's more than one meaning under the word, but they are related.
Yeah,
They are related. Which is why we're using the same word.
true.
There's a million God theories, but the reason we use the word God is they do share some features.
Yeah. Yeah, they have some core, like inherently core ideas behind the word God that we can all agree on.
I'll tell you what one of it is. It's trying to answer the question, what made the universe? Everyone who uses the word God has that sentence, that question in their head for why they used, why they're using it, or at least
Yes.
why it was invented.
The prime mover.
Yeah, although that gets vague because the prime mover
Yeah.
that made the universe and then never touched it again, or the prime mover that made the universe, made all the laws, and then fucks with the laws whenever he feels like it. That guy is an asshole.
Also,
The
by
first
the
one
way,
I'm fine with.
can we go into a very interesting topic? It just popped up in my head. I've been pondering about it.
Sure.
So, how do you refute the argument that nothing comes into existence from nothing? How do you refute the theist argument of the prime mover that there should be something to build up on it? The infinite regression argument. How can we refute this argument, or how do you go about it?
First, I'm going to write down what you said. Prime mover. And you said something from nothing.
Yes.
What else did you say?
Prime mover, something from nothing, and that's it. Like an infinite regression is not possible, I think. Although they say nowadays mathematically it's proven to be possible, but I'm just not smart enough to conceptualize the idea.
I would just say don't have the knowledge yet, man. Socrates or the ancient Greeks, more than 2,500 years ago, they came up with some really cool stuff, and they came up with the scientific approach, the scientific method, 2,500 years ago. It took another 1,000 years before anyone decided, wait a minute, maybe we should do this. Okay. And during that time, philosophers agreeing and disagreeing about these basic issues. And then recently somebody figures it out. And one question to ask is, why now and why not before? I don't know. It's pretty hard, I guess. It's very difficult to come up with this stuff, but I'll answer you on this.
Okay.
First, I would say I need them to tell me what their ideas are. This is very vague stuff. I would need somebody to tell me, like, so whenever I judge an idea, here's how I start. What's the purpose of the idea? Does the idea actually serve its purpose? If not, throw it out. If it's vague, throw it out. And I would say right now this is vague. I'm sure we could probably find a non-vague conception of what this is. And I've done that before. And then what I ended up with is I found a internal contradiction. If an idea claims to serve a purpose and then it doesn't actually serve that purpose, that's an internal contradiction. So do you want to do you know more clearly what their conception is here? Like you mentioned infinite regress. Where's the infinite regress?
Is that you cannot go back forever without stopping at a certain event to build up on it.
Cannot go back forever. I mean, that I don't know what that's getting at. What is this trying to say? I think this is trying to say something like, if or since whatever your idea was, since this idea, therefore there must be a God. Is that the logic?
Since there, can you repeat that?
Okay.
What did you say?
So since X, we're going to fill in X in a moment. Since X, therefore there must be a God that created the universe. And the X, and by the way, you can see I'm making it more clear here. Like none of this says, like maybe some of this is the X, but it doesn't say the rest of it. Since X, therefore God is what they're saying. Okay. So let's clarify what the X is.
Okay.
Since what's the okay, do you know Palos? There's a philosopher a few hundred years ago who thought about like if you found a watch in the middle of the desert, I forget his name, starts with a P, and
I don't remember, but
he concludes at the end of this line of logic that there must be a God.
Yes.
But he makes a mistake in there.
What is the mistake, by the way?
Here it is. In the famous watchmaker analogy, William Paley said that if you find a watch on a heath, you can tell the watch had a designer because of its complex inner workings. He further argued that complex inner workings of human beings implied that there had to be a designer. So this is basically the prime mover concept.
Yeah.
Okay. So we agree there. It's a good question, and it has many different ways of people saying it. Where does apparent design come from? Because what people are saying is everything looks like there's a design. Where did the design come from? Well, in the case of the watch, it's humans did it. But in the case of humans, what is it? And then there's, in the case of like me studying physics and finding out so much about how the universe works. And I really see a lot of beauty in it. Okay. So it was very easy for me to look at it and say, had to be a god. Look how perfect all of this is. And the kind of stuff I mean is like the fact that water is the only thing that when it freezes, it expands. Everything else, when it freezes, it contracts. So water, when it freezes, becomes less dense and buoyant in its own liquid. Where everything else, when it freezes, it becomes more dense than its own liquid. So water, when it freezes, goes up, and everything else, when it freezes, goes down. And that little thing, that little like piece of logic is what allows life to start on Earth. One of the millions of things that has to be there. Oceans, if water acted like all the other things, oceans would freeze from the bottom up instead of freezing at the top and that top layer becoming a shield, a heat shield for the water under it. If things froze from the bottom up, there would be no life in the ocean and no life on outside the ocean either. That kind of stuff made me think a god made this. Anyway, just getting back to the point now. We'll get to that in a second. That's the
okay.
So where does complexity come from? Where do adaptations come from? Where do useful or purposeful things come from? And all of these are really asking, where does knowledge come from? Do you see that?
Yeah. But I would still like to go back to my previous argument. How can one refute such arguments?
Yeah, that's what this whole thing is.
Okay.
So one place that Paley said it can't be randomness. A lot of people, yell at atheists. You guys say everything was random. They're right to think that it's not random. But they're wrong to think that atheists have to think shit is random. Let's see. So, and this at least for life, we do have an answer of where of how there is design. Like we know now why we have eyeballs and how they evolved. So just to give you real quick, it's not random because what's happening is the part that is random is variation of our genes. So we're basically engines of gene variant creators. And I'm not saying necessarily that our bodies cause this. It's physics causing it. Our bodies try to replicate our genes 100%, but it can't do it. That's a literally impossible thing to do. There's always errors introduced, and those are the gene variants. And now that there's gene variants, what happens is the environment selects some gene variants over others. So that first step is random, gene variants being created. And the second step is not random. The environment selects which gene variants pass on to the grandchildren and which ones don't. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yes.
So when you have iteration after iteration of new gene variant and killing off the bad gene variants, that's how we're improving over time. The eyeball has a purpose, which is to let us see in front of us. And that's a purpose within another purpose, which is to let us get food, which is a purpose within another purpose, which is to have kids. This is where some of it sucks, is evolution has a purpose for us that I don't particularly care about. Like, I want to make my own purpose. I don't want to just be a slave to evolution, which is just pump out babies. So the point is, we do know where knowledge comes from. It's evolution. So this solves part of the problem, because what people were confused about is where the knowledge comes from, the knowledge of my genes. Like, there's knowledge in my genes. Where did it come from? Random genetic variation plus the environment selecting some over others. That's the design. That's how where design comes from. So I just summarize all of this by saying all that. So now, what hasn't been discussed, man, there's so many things I have open here. I should have just skipped all that. So X was, since we don't have an explanation for where design came from, therefore there must be a God that made the design. Is that an accurate way to describe what they're trying to say? Their logic?
Pretty much, yes.
And it's the God of the gaps concept. Because I don't have an explanation, exactly. Therefore God is the explanation. That doesn't make sense. You see how that's an internal contradiction?
Yeah, I guess, yes. Yeah.
Because just not having an explanation, I mean, if you go back 1,000 years, there's a lot of explanations we have today that didn't exist 1,000 years ago. And if you just go fast forward 1,000 years, now we have less reasons to believe in God, according to that logic. So the further we go into the future, according to this logic, the less reason we have to believe in God. That makes no sense. The only kind of God that is more difficult to refute is the person that says God made the universe and left it alone after that.
But Rami, I'm not still 100% sure. Like, I understand. I understood a good portion of your argument. However, if someone specifically tries to come up with such argument that there should be a prime mover or a prime event that happened, an event without a previous event, independent of any other event.
Why does it need to be that? What's the purpose of this idea?
This is the intuitive, logical conclusion. Although I would agree that a lot of things have turned out to be
disagrees with that, so I don't know. If your intuition says that, then I guess you can go with your intuition. My intuition doesn't say that. Calling it intuitive doesn't really help.
Yeah, it doesn't help. However, it's still difficult to conceptualize something. It's difficult to conceptualize that an event did not occur independent of a previous event. So it could build up on it. I don't know if I'm clear.
Even if an event did that, why does that mean that event is a God?
So some would say, okay, this is our definition of God. This is our sole definition of God.
What, an event that started all the other events?
Yes. Independent of a previous event.
Okay, if that's all the word God means, then I ask, so what? What's this have to do with anything that matters to humans? Name one thing. It's just somebody trying to argue for why there's a God, but they made it so small that it is completely meaningless. Okay, or it's not completely meaningless. It has one little meaning, which is God made the universe, and that's it. No more ideas after that. None. Because it's not even saying things like this. God is good. God wants the best for us. God doesn't want evil people. God is doing a test on us. None of those are in there. And you can't get that idea from this logic. The only logic you can get from this is that there is a thing that made the rest of the things. And by the way, I want to be clear. I think the people that are doing that, they have an ulterior motive, which is once I convince people about this, that there is a God, now I'm going to fool them about the rest of it. They'll add five more things to it and say, see? But they didn't argue any of those 5 things.
And true, they do that. This is where they start. This is how they build up their argument, and they go from there.
Yeah, and I have no problem believing in a God that made the universe and did nothing else, because that's the same as there wasn't a God. What's the difference?
You say?
That's the same as saying there wasn't a God. Either one, God made the universe and did nothing else, or God doesn't exist. Either way, my life is the same. What's the difference? How do I live my life differently based on assumption number 1 or assumption number 2? By the way, our morality should be the same regardless of these. I hear Jordan Peterson say things like, I believe in God in the sense that I act as if he's true.
Yeah, he's very well known for that.
Have you heard that?
Of course, yeah, they say that.
And if you notice, this is the same. I act in a way where if God is real, I'm fine. If God is not real, I'm still fine.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I think we can move on now. That's true. Yeah. If this is their sole definition of God, then yeah, there is not much to it.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even do this thing. It doesn't even touch into spirituality. If the only thing is God made the universe and nothing more than that, like, okay, there's people who use words like this. You know, the connection to God thing. I think part of that is like a feeling. Part of it is a knowledge of whatever, that they're connected to the entire universe. But and that's why these are the same to me, because I already feel connected to the universe. I'm made of fucking atoms. That I think, you know what? If you really understand physics, you don't really worry about spirituality. I think we're spiritual enough. The physicists. We see such beauty in the physics that I think non-physicists don't see. And so they have to try to fill in the gap of not seeing any spirituality there, and they go add more stuff to it. Where if you just look at, like, if Richard Feynman has a lot of YouTube videos that he's late enough, and he died in 88, so there's color videos of him, and it's on YouTube now. And in one of them, he talks about how other people criticize him for, what is it? When he explains a flower, those people are saying to him, you destroy the beauty when you explain it. And Richard Feynman replies, no, if anything, I see the same beauty you're seeing, plus some. The beauty of the logic of the flower. If anything, you guys, I shouldn't say you, I don't know anything about you. You're doing med school, so you care about physics a little bit at least. There's so much beauty in the physics, the chemistry, the biology. It's so amazing. Can I say one thing real quick about the human body?
Yeah, I would love to.
So by the way, I in college, I studied physics, chemistry, biology, and I was going to do med school. First 2 years, I was going to do that. And then I took the test, and then I did well on the test, the MCAT. And then I went with a friend in an ambulance just to get a feel for that profession. And I saw the aftermath of a car accident between a gigantic semi-truck, 80,000 pounds, and a little tiny car. And I'll skip ahead. I didn't feel good. I didn't like seeing that. None of that was fun. Everyone looked sad. And I think I used that that wasn't my only reason to not go into med school. But I think maybe I lied to myself there and kind of relied on that. But anyway, so the thing I want to say that I love, or something about the human body that's amazing to me. I learned this in college when we were doing some research on hemoglobin as a function of oxygen in the atmosphere. And we were doing it on mice, and we were controlling how much oxygen was in his little environment that he was in. And what I learned was something so cool. I used the word acclimation for this. I didn't invent the word. It's the word I learned from scientists. So just an example, I'm currently acclimated to my environment. And let's talk about one little thing, the amount of air or the amount of oxygen in the air, or the density of the air too. If I go up really high up in a mountain, I'm going to have trouble breathing. If I'm there long enough, my body will change, and then I won't have trouble breathing. That process is called acclimation. And in this particular case, what happens is your body makes more hemoglobin. More hemoglobin means more oxygen can be carried with the same amount of blood by a lot, because it takes it out of solution. So now more oxygen can get into solution, and there's more hemoglobin there to carry the oxygen, take it out of solution, just a lot more oxygen. And your body does this in every little thing. I used to be a bodybuilder and powerlifter. I understood it there. I remember what I used to do to my body too. It was so cool. And and understanding all the biology in there, understanding how the muscles work, the actin and the myosin, and how they pull, how your muscle contracts, and the myelin sheath of your neurons, and the speed at which electrical signals go through a neuron is a function of how much myelin sheath is on it, which is an electrical insulation. We start off with barely any, and the more you do it, the more it gets added. Like I can translate ideas in my head into the actual physics happening in the brain. And we don't know it very well, but it's some of it. The idea that each one of our neurons, we have so many neurons in our brain, and each one can connect to, if I understand correctly, any other one. And they go search for other ones. The number of connections that are possible between neurons in your brain is more than the number of atoms in the universe. I didn't check this math myself. I heard this from some sort of expert. That is crazy to me. So, do you see me excited here?
I do.
Yeah. Isn't this what people mean by spirituality or whatever? Like loving something more than just, hey, I have to eat today. Now I got to go take a shit. Oh, I got another day of work today. That is a mind-numbing existence. But when there's topics that, and not just topics, but people, because like, I think why people are so amazing is because they're idea generators. The ideas themselves are beautiful, but an idea is like stale on its own. But a human being with a bunch of those ideas can generate new ideas. Anyway, sometimes my brain just I can't even think explicitly because it's just so much electricity happening. I think that's spirituality. If there's not a fucking, if that word has any meaning to me, it's stuff like that.
That makes sense. Just to add to that about the hemoglobin, even smokers, when they newly start smoking, their hemoglobin increases temporarily. Smokers, because less oxygen enters their body, so the body tries to acclimate to that by producing more hemoglobins.
And what happens long term to the hemoglobin?
For long term, it really like the smoking causes a lot of damage to your red blood cells overall. So in long term, depends on the person. Sometimes less hemoglobin, sometimes because
let me tell you short term.
red blood cells. Yeah.
Let me tell you short term effects of smoking. When I was in college, I was doing research under professor, last name is, I think, Bradley University, microbiology. His research was on the effects of secondhand smoke on interferon gamma. Interferon gamma is something that it's a quick response thing that helps the immune system somehow. I don't know the details. I don't know shit. But the point is, what I was learning through that is when you have secondhand smoke and I don't know how much of it, because that's difficult to gauge.
Yes.
But there's immediate effects and effects that last for hours on your interferon gamma. So your immune system's weaker. That can explain things like if you smoke, you're more likely to get a cold. Exactly, and it's so immediate. It's crazy to me how fast this stuff works. I never imagined it to be that fast, but it's very fast and immediate effects.
Exactly. Oh, that's true. Your body's in a constant response to the environment. There's no refutation of that.
We're exchanging atoms with our environment all the time. And we need to be thinking that net exchange has to be a good one rather than a bad one. You don't want to sit in a pool of poison. But a lot of people are acting in ways where they just totally ignore that. They are exchanging. They're just sitting in a vat of poison by doing things like eating. You have less of this problem, my guess is. In America, so much of our food is processed. And that is getting everywhere in the world, but like I remember I was in Syria 15 years ago. There's some processed food, but there's not very much.
True.
The way this is why everybody's fat here, and why our cancer rates are higher than the rest of the world, and why. Listen to this interesting fact. Japan, across a 30-year time span, from the time that they started adopting the American way of life of like fast food and stuff, Japan in 30 years went from the least cancer rates to the highest cancer rates of anybody in the world. From the least to the highest in 30 years by adopting the American way of eating. The standard one. There are people that eat well, obviously. I mean the McDonald's, the Burger King, that stuff. Of course, there's there's a wave of people in America that are trying to reverse that, but it's not the mainstream,
Yeah,
which is why everyone is fat here.
I'm sure it
I'm
contributes.
fat for a different reason, by the way.
Which is
My Arabness. So I grew up in a family where, first of all, my dad loves food.
yeah.
He has a really big belly, and we're five siblings. Four of them are boys, and I remember we would have competitions. I ate 2 plates. I ate 3 plates. I'm better than you. It's so
Have you
bad.
noticed, Rami? I think Middle Easterners, they're really foodie. Like they really, really love the action of
Yeah,
eating.
yeah,
Yeah, they're
yeah, and
foodie people.
cooking. My
Yeah,
dad cooks a lot. I mean, he's no
yeah.
compared to my mom. He's nothing. But I don't see a lot of. Is it common for men to be also a cook next to their wives? I don't know, but for Arabs, I mean, for Middle Easterners, is that common?
No, it's definitely not common.
Okay, but
Yeah,
if you look at the best cooks, chefs, whatever you want to call them, even in the Arab world, they're men, not women. Although maybe part of that problem is
discrimination against them.
discrimination against women and women
Yeah,
not wanting to put themselves publicly like that.
true.
Yeah.
So, by the way, can we talk about discuss another topic? I went through your Reddit a bit and I found one topic really interesting. If you don't have anything other, and if you want to talk about something else, we can go on.
Sure. What is it?
So, in one of your threads in Reddit, I saw you were talking about debates. Whether can one really convince the other person? And you also asked similar questions in the R. Lex Fridman. And you were just discussing with people, some of them would say it's not possible to convince another one.
Okay, so I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Let
uh,
me open up that thing.
yeah, it was really interesting. Like the whole science of debating or persuasion, I would
Are
say.
you talking about this?
Uh, wait.
Given infinite time and interest in
Yes,
a disagreement, would
yes,
we come to agreement?
exactly. It's such an intriguing. Yeah, yeah,
So let me do some history real quick. Let me see. Let me try to
yeah,
remember exactly where I got this question.
yeah. Okay.
No memories coming. I wonder if I made this question. I don't know. But I used this question as a way to get at something else. Um, which is this. And this is not my question. Or maybe I changed it a little bit, but I got this from other people. Are
Hmm.
there inherent conflicts between people? And what I mean by inherent means like it can't change. And
Okay.
the kind of thing that can change it, if it was changeable, is knowledge. So I put all that in one question. Are there inherent conflicts between people in the sense that they cannot be resolved with new knowledge? Um,
That's such a good question to ask.
well, if you remember the win-win and win-lose,
Yes.
so win-win answers this one way, win-lose answers it the other way.
Okay.
The win-win people say there's no inherent conflicts. And the win-lose people say, yes, there's inherent conflicts. We cannot avoid them. And what I ask here is, if you think that we would not necessarily come to agree. Remember, we're getting rid of a lot of dumb variables by going to infinite time and infinite interest. So no one can say, well, maybe we don't have enough time to come to agreement. So I get rid of all those dumb things.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get at the root fucking problem of why they think we can't come to agreement. It better not be time. It better not be I'm bored of that fucking idea. I want to hear them say something like, human nature says we can't do it. So they're answering this question. we have conflicts we can't get around. So then I asked them, okay, tell me what those obstacles are. And then I want you to show me why you think those obstacles are insurmountable. If you can't explain why the obstacles are insurmountable, then your whole answer is junk. You're just saying stuff can't happen without giving any reasons. And I've had this, I've made this discussion in a lot of different subreddits. I get a lot more engagement than in this one. I guess that's because, well, I got no engagement here. I think ex-Muslims as a group are so new to this kind of stuff. And in those other groups, they're more on this level of thinking. So we if you want, we could we could have a dedicated podcast just on that. And what I'll do is I'll come armed with all these other versions of this post from those other groups instead of trying to find them now. And we can go through all their answers. There's
I
so
would
much,
love to, yeah.
there's so much in there. And I really want to do this. What I hate, I'm making all these videos of all these posts, and some of the posts like this one, it's very short and there's no comments. The video is going to be 3 minutes long. That's not long. I need more. So what we could do is we could do a podcast about this one, and it'll be a lot longer than 3 minutes because we can look, you'll be talking and then those other posts with all their comments will be in there. That could go 2 hours easy. But you wanted to get into this now, so I guess what can I say about this? Let me first.
It's okay if you want, we can have a detailed discussion next time specifically about that. I would also get ready, read some materials so I can prepare some good questions as well.
Given infinite time and interest, will we come to agreement?
Yeah. I was also thinking just one last suggestion, Rami. If I may suggest something.
Yeah.
For you. I've seen a lot of Muslim apologists, such as Muhammad Hijab, Hamza Tortes. They make whole lectures about how to refute arguments that atheists put up. I was thinking about, what about doing a series of lectures where you have lectures like with slides, with points, how to refute Islam? Because there's no such a thing in ex-Muslim community, at least. There are YouTube videos, but no lectures. Like a 1 hour long lecture.
I think what my videos is already that. The only thing is I haven't addressed the Muhammad hijabs. I'm addressing what I think is more important. Addressing Muhammad hijab is more secondary, okay? Primary is more like, hey, you feel guilty, let me help you deal with that.
Yeah.
Hey, you fear hell, let me help you deal with that. Once I'm done with those videos, and it'll be soon, there's not that much more. The next thing I want to talk about is to help ex-Muslims deal with the Muslims, which is what you're saying here. And some of my writing is about that, because I try to tell people what to avoid. Like I tell people stuff like, look, when Muslims come to you and say, what do you believe in if not Allah? You can't just say atheism. That's fucking stupid. True. You have to say all the other things. You have to talk about morality. You have to talk about your whole goddamn worldview. And it has to include little stuff like this. I believe events have causes and humans are capable of finding them out. Because Islam says the opposite. Islam says events don't have causes. God caused everything. And humans can't figure it out. Leave it up to Allah. Just believe what Allah says. And neither of those two things are anything about God itself. They are only about, like, they're even more primary than physics. Like if you asked 1,000 physicists, like, how does stuff work? I don't think really they're gonna focus on something that's so obvious to us. Events have causes. And the next point, which is, and humans can figure them out. They won't mention those two things because it's so fucking obvious to them. And so I don't know why I brought that up. I guess here's why I brought it up. Theists, who the ones that don't study theology, you know, they're theists who also don't even study any of their religion or anybody else's religion. You know, a theologist is like a scientist about God and religion. You know, the non-theology theists, if they were to have a conversation with the physicist doesn't realize that the theist has these ideas like events don't have causes, Allah causes everything. So the physicist doesn't know how to argue about that, doesn't even know they needed to hear that.
Yeah.
And the theist doesn't realize the physicist's point, which is, hey, what are you talking about? Every event has a cause and we can figure it out. So they never connect on this basic level. And it's not physics, it's epistemology. And that's why I think Richard Feynman was correct when he said, we have not been teaching the scientific approach. We've only been doing examples and hoping you guys learn it from the examples. What are the examples we're doing? It's a whole bunch of people who are living the life of having a belief that events have causes and we can figure them out. Those are the examples of all the scientists from Isaac Newton's era till today. That's what they were doing, even if no one said it. And by the way, they did say it. Isaac Newton said some shit like that. Can I show you real quick? this is, my hair is standing right now.
Let's see.
Here we go. Newton was one of the first people to model the world as a system of parts, and he was one of the first to investigate the logic of many types of systems. And this is just as far as I know. Maybe there was people before that, but what I've noticed is when people talk about Isaac Newton, they talk about physics, they talk about calculus, they don't talk about this, which I think is even more. It's deeper than those two things. It's deeper than physics, because this is like the logic of physics. He explained that all real systems have interdependencies between their parts. And that's like saying there's cause and effect relationships. And it's also like saying, you know the phrase, the sum is not equal to its parts?
Yeah.
Okay. If the parts of the system were not connected and there was no cause and effect relationships, then that wouldn't be true. Instead, what would be true is the sum is equal to the parts. The fact that the sum is not equal to its parts implies that when you put parts together, things are happening that don't happen when the parts are not together. The cause and effect thing. Now, the really cool thing is something he said, as the number of interdependencies between the parts of a system increases, so as this goes up, as we go to the right here, the number of parts that govern the whole system decreases. You see it's going down?
Yeah.
Until it reaches exactly 1. So what does that mean? It means that any system that has sufficiently enough interdependencies between the parts has one thing that if you were to change it, it will affect the whole system. And all the other things, if you change it, nothing happens. This matters to the human body and medicine. It matters everywhere, but let me bring it to your life. There are doctors who, when they are helping somebody with whatever their symptoms are, they look too narrowly and look at, let's say, one organ, and they don't look at how that's interconnected with other things, and then they end up with a solution. They end up with a solution that doesn't really work, because I'm going to say it like this now. Think in terms of bottlenecks and constraints. Okay, a system has a bottleneck, has one bottleneck. If you try to take any of the other parts of the system that isn't the bottleneck, and if you try to increase its capacity, what have you done to the system? Nothing.
Nothing, probably, yeah.
The only way you can affect the system is to affect that bottleneck, which is one thing. And that's what's happening in the human body, obviously. Like the human body is so complex. There is just one thing. But then everybody gets to decide what the output is. So, for example, the output of the system, I mean, what is, like, if you're 100 years old and you have some disease, a doctor is not going to give you an option to, let's say, do some long surgery that takes a year of recovery, because they know you're almost dead anyway.
Yeah.
And they know what you care about now is the quality of my life towards the end of my life. Like, there's people who say, fuck the hospital. I don't want to die in the hospital. I want to die at home. So I will forfeit whatever the fuck the hospital was going to do for me. Let's say they was going to give me some benefit at the hospital. So I forfeit that benefit if I go home. But I get another benefit that I care more about, which is, let's say, being with my loved ones at home instead of the dying in the hospital experience.
Yeah.
So we should do another episode just about that.
Hopefully.
The cause and effect logic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you asked me about uniting the cults and what that is.
Yeah.
So let me put that in here. Uniting the Cults it's a YouTube channel, and it's a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
The idea is to be an agent of cultural change, with the purpose of, or with a vision of getting rid of apostasy laws worldwide, and to deal with human rights issues more generally. And in the meantime, until that's solved, to help ex-Muslims escape their abusive situations with know-how and money, and more generally to help people after they leave Islam too. They're not all of a sudden, solved all their suffering problems.
Yeah, not true.
Yeah. So actually,
okay.
There's something that my mother and I have started to do. Well, we've been doing this privately for a long time, but now we made it a public invitation. And the only place I've put it so far is right here. Are you struggling with doubt or fear after leaving Islam? We're here to help. Many people come to us privately saying that they struggle and that they've even reverted back to Islam in the past. And we've been helping these people. And when I say we, most of this, there's a Facebook group called, I don't remember the name. They use the word shabake, but I think it's Arab Atheists Network Forum. And I don't remember the Arabic words.
Shabaka? Shabaka?
Yeah.
It means network in English. If I translate the
Yeah, but it's not just one word though, it's 4 words.
Oh, okay.
Right there.
Shabaka woman.
This used to be 100,000 members. Now it's 9,000 members. because Facebook doesn't like them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that sucks. And anyway, in here is where a lot of this was happening. These people would end up in my mom's DMs asking for help, and she would help them. And I've done it too. She does it in Arabic, I do it in English. And now we're opening this up as a public invitation. And people can be anonymous if they need to. And we're going to be posting this in 4 groups.
Okay.
And we want to, like, I want to make these public discussions that end up on the YouTube so other people can learn from them.
So have you done any of these, by the way?
Public ones? No. Recorded?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Not
Okay.
yet. I came up with this idea 3 days ago.
Okay. Well,
and I'm still in the mix of getting those 3 other groups to allow me to post this thing. So far, ex-Muslim group said yes, and the Shabaka said yes, because that's my mother, she's an admin. And the other group, which is the other group is this one. Al-Had Al-Mulhideen.
Al-Had Bila Hudud.
Okay. Bila Hudud, yeah. So no limits or no lines,
yeah, exactly.
No boundaries.
Yeah, no boundaries. Limited,
yeah.
No
so
boundaries.
My Arabic is like reading and writing is like 1st grade level. And like speaking, it's not too bad for Syrian dialect, but I can't do any complex talking of like politics or anything.
Okay.
So other than English, what do you speak?
I speak Kurdi, a little bit of Arabic, a little bit of German, and a bit of Turkish. Although my Turkish is like, I barely can speak anymore, but I can still comprehend a good amount of Turkey.
And everything you're saying is oral language rather than reading and writing?
No. Kurdish is my native. Arabic, I can do reading and writing. English, I can do reading and writing. German.
Well, your English is very good. I can see that.
Yeah.
Like, so your Arabic is that level?
It's not that level, to be honest with you, but it's still good. Okay. Yeah. I can understand like almost everything in Arabic. However, like I might have some difficulty while talking. I would not use the correct words, or my vocabulary dictionary is not very rich. I would say that.
So answering the question a little bit more.
Yeah.
What is uniting the cults? So I
okay.
3 or 4 years ago, I realized something, which is that Richard Feynman's speech in 1974 is the most important speech ever given. And I wanted to make a speech that continues that speech. And I was waiting for the 50th anniversary, which is coming up June 24th this year. Exactly 77 days, 4 hours, 6 minutes, 53 seconds. And I mean to the hour. To the hour, this is the 50th anniversary. I want to do a live stream event where I make that continuation speech. He dedicated that whole hour, or I don't know how long his speech was. He dedicated his whole speech to the one thing, which is, well, I actually don't want to give it up here. I want to do it during the live stream event. But I'm willing to say plenty of stuff, like, which I say right here. What Feynman did was identify some cult behaviors. He used the word cult, but the other word he used was pseudo-science. And that's a word that has been used since then. Pseudo-science, very common term. What it means is somebody is doing what looks like science, but it's not science.
Yeah.
And in the case of Feynman's speech, the example he gave was there's this African tribe, I think it was Africa, that was visited by Western scientists. They were studying the tribe. And then the Westerners were done with the project and they left, never to return. Though that tribe wanted them to come back. And instead of making a phone call or sending an email, and they don't have phones or computers, right? What they did was they built a plane and headphones and all the stuff that they remember what they saw when the scientists came, and they built that stuff out of wood, bamboo wood. So obviously it doesn't work. And the scientists never showed up. And they were confused as to why.
Yeah.
So they're doing what looks like science to them, but it's not science. You know, making a plane that flies. It would have been science if the plane flies. And this group became known as a cargo cult, the cargo cult. The cargo plane is the word cargo from that. It was a cargo plane that they made out of wood to try to get the scientists to come back.
It never worked.
Yeah, it never worked. And what Richard Feynman did was he showed how even physicists are doing these things. And the example he gave was, it has to do with this science experiments. When you do a science experiment that is building on previous work, you want to repeat the experiment that was done before to make sure you get the same result, and then do your extra experiment version, which tests some other variable. And you got to do that first step, because if you don't, then you're not really linking to that last experiment at all. And why physicists do this? Well, because the machines are expensive. And the department wants to not use up the machines for what they think is not very important. They don't care about the validity of the science research. They care about the number of papers published. So they tell someone who's saying, hey, I want to do this experiment, and I need to redo the experiment from before. And then the administrator says, no, you don't need to redo the experiment from before. We already have that done. Here's the results. Use that. We need to pump out more published papers. That's called behavior. It's anti-scientific. It's pseudoscience. So that's a recap of that speech. And what I'm doing is expanding on that by showing all the cult behaviors. And you can see it as like, what these physicists are doing is the least of the bad cult behaviors. It's the least bad. It is bad, but it's the least bad. What is the worst bad? Apostasy laws. Death penalty for saying, I changed my religion. And I wanted to make sure that I'm not talking about only the worst, you know, a very close second, I think, in terms of the ideas themselves, rather than like quantity of this happening. The USA treating whistleblowers as traitors. Another one, which I don't even mention here, and this is actually worse. It's worse than all of this. North Korea.
Okay.
If somebody leaves North Korea, first of all, it's illegal to leave. If somebody leaves North Korea, not only are they going to now want to kill you, they will go kill your whole family and your whole tribe. That's worse than Islam, or worse than these countries that have these apostasy laws related to Islam. I should have put that on here. Maybe I'll change it. That's the worst one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question about the Richard Feynman speech.
Yeah.
Why did he like I don't know how to best express myself. Yeah. Why would he call a scientist a cult behavior if he does not like redo the previous research that he's gonna build his work on?
I
Why is
guess I didn't hit on that point enough. If you don't
yeah.
if you don't get if you don't redo the previous experiment and make sure you get the same result, then you can't have any trust in any of the work you just did. Because there could be some variable you don't know about that got changed from the last experiment to your own experiment. And even though you're supposed to repeat the same experiment, but a variable changed. I mean, you're in a different building, you got different stuff happening in you hope it's the exact same variables, and you hope you have all the same constants, but you don't know until you redo the experiment and get the same result. And then you can do your new experiment that changes a new variable, and you want to see what happens when you have that new variable. If you don't redo the last experiment, you can't talk about how your variable changed anything, because you didn't even show what it was without that new variable. You cannot rely on another person's experiment that has they have a different apparatus. There are different, so the example he gives, another example he gives in his speech is in psychology, and it was to do with rat experiments. There was a guy who was he was trying to understand rats and learning a maze to get some food they want. And he was noticing that every time he did this experiment, the rats would find the food really easily, and he was trying to get them to not be able to do that by like confusing them in the maze, but they kept finding it very easily. And he obviously he's brainstorming and thinking, well, maybe the rats are noticing this because of various things, like the doors are painted white or some other thing. And by the end of it, what he had figured out was the rats were listening to the floor they're walking on. So he solved this by putting his rat maze on sand. And then the rats couldn't hear their own walking, and he succeeded in confusing them. They couldn't easily find the food anymore. But it took him like 20 iterations of changing things, of imagining why maybe the rats are finding what they're finding, until he ruled out everything till this last one he found. The point of me bringing this up is what Feynman noticed was he looked at all the psychology research after that research, and he noticed not one psychologist who was researching rats mentioned that rat experiment. But if you don't look at that rat experiment, what it means is so what that guy figured out isn't transferring over into the new experiments. So that means their rat experiments are junk, because they didn't figure out this thing. Like if you're going to do a rat maze experiment and you don't know about the sand under your maze, you're not going to figure out anything about what these rats are doing. I might be losing you. Let me make this clear point. Science has to build on older science. if you're a scientist and you say I'm going to ignore everything from the past and start from scratch, well, you're the dudes from 2,500 years ago coming up with ideas like, okay, people like Socrates were very smart. Okay, I highly respect Socrates and his philosophy, but the ideas they had about physics was ridiculous. Can't really blame them. They were the first guys to think about that stuff. But 2,500 years later, if you're going to be a physicist, you better not go back to where Socrates was doing. Sure. You need to learn everything that was learned in the last 2,500 years. That's why when you study physics in school, like university level at least, they go back to 400 years ago and say, this is what they actually go back to ancient Greece. Here's the ideas they had about physics back then. And then they go to 400 years ago, like Isaac Newton and some guys right before him. And they're not just explaining they're explaining the history of the ideas. They're explaining the history of the experiments and why anyone even thought of the experiments and how they worked. Any physicist today, they know that whole history. So this idea of a psychologist doing a rat experiment without building his research on that awesome rat experiment I just told you about, they're not acting like a scientist. They're acting like a cult. I say it's like a cult, but what is a cult? It's just whatever we were before science. That's it.
Nice. That's a nice.
Whatever we were before science.
Yeah.
Science is what changed the world for us. A lot of people will say, no, it was philosophy. Well, I'm actually combining those as the same thing. Philosophy and science is the same thing. And I'm not the only one saying this. A lot of people, when I say that, they think, well, go convince other people. There's a lot of people saying this before me. I found out that in German circles, and you mentioned you know some German. Maybe you can help me with this. This person told me that in German circles, the people, Germans who talk about science, so science-minded Germans, they also say science and philosophy are the same thing, like I'm saying. And I'm guessing that part of why they figured it out and the rest of the world hasn't yet is the greatest epistemologist known as Karl Popper. He was a German.
Obviously.
And I didn't read his German work. He learned English so that he could engage with English-speaking scientists and philosophers. And I'm pretty sure German scientists and philosophers, they know about Karl Popper, and I think Karl Popper also knew this. Actually, I have a quote from Popper that will show what I'm saying here. Let me see how I can find this.
Okay.
What's the words? I know it's on my Facebook, but I don't know how deep I have to go find it.
Yeah.
I know lots of people have turned it into a meme, so maybe looking under images would help.
Yeah, let's see.
Let me go to my Facebook and try to find it.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I don't know if I'm going to find it.
Or you can just explain what he meant.
Some stuff is, there it is. I found it. Some stuff is so awesome. I'm not good enough to say this.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? Maybe give me 20 years and I will, but I'm not there yet.
I think that there's only one, right?
I think it's worth it to say this out loud. So I'm going to go ahead and say it for people listening.
Yeah.
I think that there is only one way to science, or to philosophy for that matter, to meet a problem, to see its beauty and fall in love with it, to get married to it, and to live with it happily till death do you part, unless you should meet another and even more fascinating problem, or unless indeed you should obtain a solution. But even if you obtain a solution, you may then discover, to your delight, the existence of a whole family of enchanting, though perhaps difficult, problem children, for whose welfare you may work with a purpose to the end of your days. Notice how he said, there's only one way to science, or to philosophy for that matter. They're the same thing. People try to separate them by saying, no, science is about empirical claims. And philosophy has nothing to do with empirical claims. That's ridiculous.
Would you disagree?
Huh?
Would you disagree with that?
Yeah, I disagree, because science, a small part of it is to do with empirical issues. Small part, 1%. The other 99% has nothing to do with empirical claims. It's logic. And so let me say a couple things about this.
Okay.
Something David Deutsch said in his book, The Beginning of Infinity. He said, the vast majority of scientific theories, I'm paraphrasing here, the vast majority of scientific theories are not refuted by empirical evidence. They are refuted by philosophical criticism. Only the theories that passed that philosophical criticism, only those will we ever try to attempt or spend any time or effort doing an empirical experiment. And the people that see science as just empirical, they're not scientists. None of them have any clue about science. They only know what they learned in 8th grade about what science is.
Yeah.
You have a hypothesis, you do an experiment. That's all they know about science, and it's wrong. This reminds me of what Richard Feynman said during that speech. Right at the end, he said, I apologize that we science professors, physics professors, we don't teach the scientific approach directly. We have been basically just giving you examples, hoping you would learn it that way. And when you take at least in America, you take a high school class for science or whatever, and they tell you what the scientific method is, that's an attempt at directly teaching you the scientific approach. And it is a horrible attempt. Horrible.
Why would you say it's a horrible method to teach?
It's not a horrible method. Their attempt at teaching it is horrible. Just saying this concept of the scientific method is you make a hypothesis and then you make an experiment that could rule it out. That just saying that is not giving you a good idea of what science is. And those 2 articles that I wrote, they're on my blog. These 2 articles, The Scientific Approach to Anything and Everything, and Improving TOC Using the Scientific Approach. These independently explain what the scientific approach is. And I am trying to do what Richard Feynman said we didn't do. This one is written for a general audience, and it's more like a magazine article. And this one is written for a business audience, and it's a lot longer. So like I start by saying, okay, here's what the scientific approach is. And I identify 10 principles. First one is fallibility. We all make mistakes. There's no idea that somebody can have that is infallible. And then I go on to talking about all of them. And these are not like in stone. These are just this is just a view of the scientific approach. If you fast forward 1,000 years, I'm sure someone will have a better view of the scientific approach. Not just new ideas, but a different way of explaining that makes more sense to the people from 1,000 years from now. I wrote this for what I think is the general audience today. If this was written 1,000 years ago, it would be different. Because they had different misconceptions 1,000 years ago than today. And again, different 1,000 years to the future. And you notice I put people in here. The scientific approach, if you don't talk about people, I don't think you're talking about it right. Oh, what happened? What just happened there? Oh.
Harmony between people. Okay, if you don't talk about, you said if you don't talk about people, I don't think you're doing science.
Yeah, so science, independent of the actor doing the science, I don't think that makes sense. So like what we were saying about the scientific approach and how to do science, you have to be doing the correct actions. Well, part of the correct actions is, for example, listening to another human being who has a different opinion than you do. If I don't treat people right, am I going to do that right?
Probably
You're not. You're not. You have to treat people right in order to be a good scientist.
But can't, like, I think there are a lot of scientists who might be dishonest people in their personal life. However, when it comes to science, they might be like popular or well-known scientists as well, with some good work.
Yeah, there's some of that, but there's plenty of the opposite, which is the more you learn how to be honest in one field, that becomes general knowledge that you end up, even without trying, you end up applying it in all the other fields. But it doesn't mean you end up perfect. There's going to be areas in your life where you're still not applying those general ideas.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, I'm sure there are scientists cheating on their wives.
There are, definitely. So what I'm understanding you, Rami, here, if I like give summarize like a very generalization, is that somehow you try to connect the morality with the science. Am I getting you correct? Is it true?
Yes.
That's one. The second thing, you criticize that we're taught, especially me as well, I'm a university student, we're taught how to study science, but not how to do science. Would you say that's correct as well?
No, I don't think they're doing well. They're not really teaching you how to do science, unless you're counting when they give you 1,000 examples of people having done science in the past. That's a way of teaching you how to do science. It's not a great way. They're not telling you very general ideas and showing you how the examples fit. That doesn't work well.
This is what I meant. Like, they teach us how to study science, but not how to do the action of science.
I see what you're saying. Well, they're teaching. They're not. I wouldn't even say that first part. They're not teaching you how to do science. What they're doing is showing you examples of having science.
How to study science, because I think it's difficult. Like,
they don't really teach you how to study, do they? I mean, they do it in front of you. They do examples of previous scientists. They talk about it. You work on some problems. You discuss it. And in effect, people are learning how to study science that way because they're doing it to you. And then you inadvertently learn that stuff. But no one sat down with you and said, here are the principles of science, and here's how to know when you're not doing science, and here's the difference between science and pseudoscience. None of that's happening. As far as I know, I mean, and not in the schools I went to, not even in the university time I spent. And I got a degree in physics.
Well, now that I reflect back on my university journey, I'm a senior student. I think that's true. They never taught us how to differentiate between a pseudoscience and science.
Yeah.
But
Well, mostly because they don't know. And by the way, whatever my ideas are on that, it's not complete. We're still trying to figure it out. Popper had some ideas on how to differentiate science from pseudoscience. So did Feynman, and so did Ellie Goldratt. And you need all of them. You need all of them, and including the new ones that haven't been invented yet.
Would you say that the methods how to do science would be found within philosophy?
Yes, and they better be the same. So you just brought up another issue. I'm going to show you another post.
Okay.
Here we go. We should organize all of the good intellectual tools created in all fields into a single unified system. So all the best ideas from philosophy, all the best ideas from science, physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, even theology, all the best ideas should be put into one system. And obviously they have to be consistent with each other. They can't contradict each other. And that unified system, I call it the scientific approach. The name doesn't matter. You can call it anything. You could call it reason. You could call it philosophy. You could call it science. You could call it rationality. What you call it doesn't matter. What matters is whoever's reading it needs to know what we're talking about. A single unified system that you can use for any field. That's how it was, by the way. We separated it 500 years ago. If you go back 500 years, like Isaac Newton, he wasn't known as a physicist. He was known as a natural philosopher, a philosopher that deals with nature. He was a fucking philosopher. That's it. Stop. Philosopher. He's also a physicist.
Would you say, Rami, would you say the tools that are used in a specific field of science would be also of use in the other field, even if the two fields like they're very different or they're not correlated that much?
Well, there are ideas that apply to all of them. And of course, there's some that only apply to some. So for example, in medicine, we have the concept of double-blind study. Well, you only need that because there's humans involved. You don't need that if it's atoms.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so, but the point is, the logic in the concept of double-blind study is the same logic being used everywhere else in science. It just wasn't needed in a lot of other fields because there's no humans involved. But the logic of it is the same. You're trying to separate constants from variables, and you're trying to have only one variable being different in the two, like in any experiment, you have two trials. The idea is there's only one variable different between the two. And the concept of a double-blind study helps you achieve that.
Yeah.
And you only need it when there's humans involved in the study. The subjects of the study is humans. That's why you need a double-blind study. We're trying to get rid of the placebo effect.
Exactly.
You know the placebo effect? Yeah. Well, we don't need to get rid of a placebo effect when we're talking about
Atoms.
Atoms.
Yeah.